This is Radio Free Wall Street with Lee Adler, on the web at radiofreewallstreet.fm and wallstreetexaminer.com. Hi everybody, I'm Lee Adler and this is Radio Free Wall Street for Friday, May 1st, 2015. To GDP or not to GDP? That is the question. This week the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the BEA, released the first quarter advanced estimate of gross domestic product for the U.S., and it came in at 0.2%, as you are probably well aware by now. I have a lot of problems with that number. It's completely inconsistent with what I think is reality. Reality being the information that we get from tax collections, which is actual hard data that we get in real time. It's not manipulated, it's never revised, and it's been growing at about a 5% nominal rate year to year, which if you adjust for the increase in wages and salaries, is about a 3% real growth rate year to year. And in fact, the gross domestic product growth rate on a year-to-year basis, as reported by the BEA, was 3%. So how do they come up with that 0.2% number, which I think is ridiculous? When I compare the withholding tax growth rates for the first quarter of this year and the last quarter of 2014, the difference implies a quarterly growth rate of 1.8%. So it becomes a question of, what do you want to believe? Do you want to believe a manipulated, massaged, fictitious statistic, or do you want to believe the actual tax collection data, which tells us, I think, exactly what the U.S. economy is doing? That choice is up to you. Now, why are there so many problems with the GDP estimate that the BEA puts out? I'm going to let the BEA itself tell you. A couple of years ago, one of their people did a presentation. I have some PowerPoint slides here that I will show you that is from that presentation. And it basically spells out directly the issues with the GDP estimates. And this is right from the horse's mouth, right from the BEA itself. First thing that they notice is that seasonal adjustment methods can interpret the sharp contraction in the fourth quarter of 2008 and the first quarter of 2009 as a change in seasonal patterns. We are now 5 years past that, so maybe that data is dropping off, but nowhere in the documentation that I looked, there's hundreds of pages of it, so I could have missed this, but nowhere do they say exactly what the look-back period is for their data. And I think there's a very good reason for that. It's because they're constantly manipulating the seasonal adjustment factors in the data itself. Many are revised annually, many are revised each period, even if there are no adjustments to the unadjusted data. And then to top it off, they go back and revise all of the previously released data based on these new seasonally adjusted revisions, fitting the old data to the actual. And they conclude in another slide that the correct way to weight 2008 Q4 and 2009 Q1 in seasonal adjustment is unclear. No one observes the true seasonal factors. So, and now at this point in 2015 first quarter, we don't even know if that data has dropped off the series that they're using to estimate. They use a program that they've developed in concert with the Bank of Spain, of all places, called X13 ARIMA Seats. And that's a program that you can download and actually use yourself from the Census Bureau. But what it stands for, X13, I guess, is just the number of the series. They started out years ago with X10, X11, X12. Now it's X13 ARIMA Seats. ARIMA stands for Autoregressive Integrated Moving Average. So at least we know, even though we're not statisticians, that they're using some kind of a moving average to get to these seasonal adjustments. SEATS just stands for Signal Extraction in ARIMA Time Series. So it's autoregressive integrated moving average signal extraction in a REMA time series. It's a complicated way to say, hey, we use a moving average, and if there's some data in here that's an outlier or extreme due to an economic collapse or a strong recovery, don't forget that in 2010, the numbers were extremely strong as the economy reversed and had a bungee rebound. We had very strong gains in some of these series. So these numbers are probably still included in the averages, and may be why we're seeing these negative numbers in the first quarter last year and almost negative. You remember the first quarter last year was down 1 point some percent, and then this very weak number. So that could be part of the reason. They say, why do seasonal adjustments? Well, we can remove seasonal effects from a time series. Seasonal effects are thought to have roughly the same time, intensity, direction each year. And then they say to better view underlying movements, cycles and trends, identify direction and turning points. Without adjusting for seasonality, and I think this is a key that will make those of you who have any familiarity with stock charting or trends or just drawing trend lines, they say that without adjusting for seasonality, it may be too difficult to view the significance of movements. Well, it's not difficult at all. If you're a chartist, you just put a straight line between the lows and the highs, and you can see the trend channels. It works just as well with economic data, but it doesn't work with seasonally adjusted data because you're creating a fiction. You have to use actual data, and that's what I do, and that's what has kept us on track in seeing what the economy is really doing. There's really no change in the trends. You can see them very clearly using the actual unmanipulated data, but because these people are economists and statisticians, and not simple-minded chartists, they can't come to the understanding that it's much easier to analyze actual data than fake data. Here you have all of the reasons, and basically what they're saying is we fit our seasonally adjusted estimates to the actual data over time. Now, how often do they do that? They're going to do it in the next quarterly release. They're going to revise the seasonal adjustment factor in July. For this quarter, so they're going to give us a revision for the first quarter based on seasonal factors in July. And in addition, they tell us elsewhere that they're going to revise all of the last 3 years. So the current estimate is going to get revised on a monthly basis as more data comes in. Then it'll get revised on a quarterly basis in July when the next estimate comes out. And then it's going to get revised every year as additional and more complete data come in and as they adjust the seasonal adjustment factors over time. This first estimate is nowhere near real. Now, there's no single seasonal adjustment applied to GDP. This is another thing that's important to understand about how this number is calculated. The BEA's estimates of detailed components of GDP and GDI rely mostly on source data that are already seasonally adjusted by the Census Bureau, BLS, and the Federal Reserve. What this means is that the calculation of GDP, seasonally adjusted, is the sum of a myriad of other seasonally adjusted components. The BEA seasonally adjusts only a portion of the detailed components of GDP and GDI. The BEA prepares seasonally adjusted estimates of detailed components and then aggregates them to estimate GDP and GDI. In other words, the hundreds of component indicators are each individually seasonally adjusted by the preparer of the source. In some cases, that's the BEA. In some cases, it's the Fed. In some cases, it's the Census Bureau. In some cases, it's the BLS. But all of these series are aggregated on some weighted basis to combine into the GDP estimate, which is a seasonally adjusted GDP. But there's no one seasonal adjustment for the GDP. There are just hundreds of seasonal adjustments to these sources. Now, the BEA says that the estimation process does not require the estimation of seasonally unadjusted GDP. In other words, they have no idea what the actual numbers are. None. Seasonal adjustment problems with any one data source may have only a limited effect on seasonally adjusted GDP. Now, here's the problem. If you have these hundreds of inputs and the seasonal factors tended to be all going in different directions at different times, then maybe the errors would potentially cancel each other out. But in most cases, the seasonal effects are going in the same direction at the same time. Things are slower in the winter, a little bit hotter in the spring, and so on. So all of the seasonal adjustments, or not all of them, but most of them are going to be going in the same direction. Therefore, any errors that are inherent in the data are going to be multiplied. And then, to make matters worse, after combining the seasonal adjustment errors, they multiply everything times 4 in order to annualize it. So there you have it, straight from the horse's mouth, exactly what some of the problems with the GDP estimate are. Over time, these estimates will get fitted to the actual data, but we already have actual tax collection data, and we have actual data in some other series, so why not focus on the stuff where we know that we're getting real data rather than this idiotic nonsense, this manipulated concoction. So to get an idea of where the economy really is, I thought we should take a look at the actual change in withholding tax collections over January, February, and March. And what that tells us